What's up everyone, welcome to today's video, welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So today I wanted to take some time because I've been wanting to do this and make a dedicated video about the conversation regarding Gotham Knights being canceled for the PlayStation 4 and for the Xbox One consoles. Now the short and sweet is it's not necessarily the best look for the developers. Even though I know that this might have been a necessary change, it still was something that they could have done earlier. The developers promised that the game will come out on all of these consoles and then waited till their gameplay reveal 6 months before to do a silent, passive announcement or unannouncement of it. That did not necessarily bode well with the conversation, and I think it's going to cause just a little bit of trust issues. Not to even think about the fact that the install base that was there potentially would have been really large if they had the capability to run this game on the old consoles. But keep in mind as well that there's something we also have to factor in. The old consoles are outdated hardware. In fact, let's look at the words of a developer who has worked on some really significant games, and let's see if they actually have something to offer to this particular conversation. So in April of last year, Frederick Thailander, who is a developer with Ubisoft Massive, he is currently working on the Star Wars game right now, has worked on Battlefield, Mirror's Edge, and Tom Clancy's The Division 1 and 2. These are all significant games, and he said something about AI in a conversation thread last year. People were having these conversations, and I think he was saying some things regarding a video that Jim Sterling had put out, and he said something about AI. You can make great AI regardless, but the processing power comes from somewhere, and for it, you have to balance everything the game needs to do on the target hardware, which up to this point has been 2013 laptop CPUs, Xbox Ones, and PS4 in parentheses. He's referring to the fact that the power of the PS4 and Xbox One are pretty much the hardware technology of about 2013 laptops. I mean, how many of you remember what a 2013 laptop was capable of doing? If you open a spreadsheet on some 2013 laptops, they'll get super janky. The way the developers were able to deliver games like Arkham Knight and, some of these other really cool games like Mad Max and all of the others was, in my opinion, more of a miracle in terms of optimization and technology. But also keep in mind that games have continued to be more and more ambitious since then. This is not giving the developers an excuse nonetheless. I'm just saying that there is a limitation, and the potential to have another Cyberpunk 2077 was possibly what they were trying to avoid. In fact, let's look at another example that I was actually intricately very familiar with at the time of release. One of the games that this developer who made this statement worked on, Tom Clancy's The Division 2, released in a very sorry state. In fact, when the game came out on PlayStation, it was so poorly optimized, lighting was bad, the game just was almost unplayable. It wasn't Cyberpunk levels of unplayable, but it was really bad. And at that point, everybody was shocked because it was just the PlayStation 4 that was giving these issues. The Xbox One did not give any issues. The PC version did not give, those issues at all. And I think everybody was looking and saying, man, this is not good, because one other thing that PlayStation basically brings to the table is a lot of players. So that was actually felt on a much more challenging level than, say, if it had happened on Xbox or even maybe PC, which PC is also subjective. Some computers will play a game well, and some PCs will probably not play the game well based on hardware, software updates, and all of the above. So I think what happened with Gotham Knights is possibly this. But again, like I said, it doesn't give them a cop-out. It just means they should have been much more proactive in communicating with the community and letting people know where they stood regarding the project. Now, here's another thing. Many developers will almost never come out to tell you, hey, the PlayStation 4 kind of sucks for our game. They don't want to do that because they have all these agreements with Sony and Microsoft, so they'll almost never cite those limitations whenever they're talking specifically about a video game. But let's not be fooled, because they want to keep their corporate relationships fine. It is, in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges that video games are facing right now, especially with the limitations and the ambition of video game developers. Now, another really cool thing that we really have to come and put in mind is, what do the future video games look like? And I think the answer is quite clear. If you notice, games like Spider-Man, games like Wonder Woman are moving all the way to the next gen of consoles. They're not waiting around. They're not beating around the bush. They just want to go straight for the new generation of consoles so that they can pretty much leverage all of the power that those consoles have to be able to meet the vision of their video games. Gotham Knights, I think, had to do that. Now, let's also address something that might come up in a conversation. The game Gotham Knights in the newest gameplay trailer reveal does not look like a next-gen game. And I understand that. I mean, that's kind of subjective though, because, if you look at Returnal, other games like that, you'll probably ask yourself and say, well, is this really a next gen game in the way that it looks? It looks good. It's optimized. Everything runs pretty well. But there are also other games from past generations that look better than Returnal. And so how a game looks is not necessarily the measure of it being a next gen game or not. And I know this might sound controversial, might sound crazy, but it's just the truth. I mean, think about a game like, say, Spider-Man Miles Morales or Spider-Man Remastered or whatever it is. These games run on the PlayStation 4, but they have a PS5 version. Now, why and what would be the difference? The difference would be the machine is capable of running more tasks and using more power. Visual effects, lighting, all kinds of atmospheric, elements that are added will be run better on a more powerful machine. And that's the majority of the difference. And then most importantly, depending on the design of the game, streaming is the main thing. Now, another thing too, you have to kind of keep in mind is even the Spider-Man 2 game that's been promised, the developers pretty much wanted to do that game exclusively on the PS5 because they wanted to leverage all of its power because of the streaming capabilities that it has, meaning that Spider-Man will be able to swing all through the world and the world will load quickly without any machine limitations. And so these are some of the things that we have to, put into consideration because we can't necessarily just go back with the look of the game. We have to look at the overall picture, which is what the game is trying to achieve. And I get it. Gotham Knights doesn't necessarily look like a next-gen game in terms of textures and in terms of colors and in terms of effects and all of that. That's just the truth. But we have to ask ourselves, what is the scope of this game? How big is the world? What are the developers trying to achieve? The multiplayer settings and the multiplayer elements, how is that working on the hardware that they're designing or, trying to target for the game? And I think these things will answer the questions. The sad part, though, is we're probably not going to hear anything from the developers. They're not going to tell us these things. And so we have to look around to be able to glean and see what's going on. But overall, I think this is probably one foot back or a step back in a sense in terms of how video games are coming and in terms of ambition of developers going forward. But nonetheless, I want to hear your thoughts about all of this. Do you think that the game would have deserved a PlayStation 4 release, especially after being shown in its early reveal days that it was going to be coming on those consoles? So the devs may have known something. And even development-wise, the game was more than likely in development before the new gen of consoles showed up. So I almost see no reason as to why they decided to make that move, even though, yes, the hardware is limited. It still, in my opinion, doesn't feel like a worthwhile explanation after years and years of development of this one game on this so-called old hardware. Could the scope not have been limited to that hardware? I wonder why those changes happened. Talk to me in the comment section. I appreciate you guys so much, and hopefully we'll talk soon. Peace out.